Hey, it's Mark from Alter Ego Comics, and tonight I am joined by comic book writer Matthew Rosenberg. Hello, Matthew.
Hi, thanks for having me, Mark.
I apologize for the lateness here. We've had some technical difficulties
Yeah.
On both of our ends.
Yeah.
We're using a new streaming platform for me through Facebook. I had to monkey around with, and Matt had to monkey around with a device that would actually work.
Yeah, apparently
But we're here.
my computer doesn't want to record audio, which is fun. It's a fun decision for it to make. So I'm on my phone, but we improvise.
Yeah, so bear with us if we end up with frozen screens or one of us disappears or audio drops out or any of those things. But we'll be back to give an official wrap up when we're finished.
Yeah.
But if you are tuning in, make sure that you say hi. Let us know that you're out there. And Matt, I think, is it okay if we get some questions posted along the way that we'll try and answer?
Yeah, for sure. That'd be great.
Okay, so if any viewers have questions, go ahead and type those in the comments, and we'll get to those probably maybe at the end of the interview, but maybe we'll just experiment and drop a question in here and there. So again, give us a shout out if you're joining us, and also feel free to post questions. And make sure to give us thumbs up and hearts.
Yeah, you may have to read any questions to me because I'm on my phone, so it will be very tiny if I'm trying to read it.
That's fine. I read good. Oh, wait, I read well. No.
There you go. Perfect.
All right, so let's do a little superhero origin story or comic creator origin story. How did you get into comics, and how did you go from presumably a comic book fan to a comic book writer?
Yeah. So I think I have the most boring getting into comics story of anyone. I think it's very generic. I have an older brother. He's 4 years older than me. And he was into comics. And his one rule was don't go into my room and touch my comics when I go out. So, of course, that's what I would always do. And I would sneak in and I say this to people and they're like, oh, that's cute, but I actually mean it. Like, I literally learned to read reading the Dark Phoenix saga, like picking up those comics and like sounding out words was sort of the first book I ever picked up of my own volition that I remember. And I just always loved comics. I actually was lucky enough to grow up. I grew up in New York, and I had a comic book store on my block when I grew up. Big Apple Comics, which is no longer with us, but was a great store. And I just would go there every day after school, and I fell in love with comics and all the comics could be there. And I never really grew out of it. I know that a lot of people sort of like they get into comics and then they get into other stuff and they drift away and then they come back. I didn't really have that drifting away from comics thing that a lot of my contemporaries seem to have had. But I never thought about making comics. That was not something that ever crossed my mind after I was 10. When I realized I definitely couldn't draw, I gave up the idea of making comics. And then I went and worked in the music business for a long time. I put out records and toured with bands and ran a record store and everything you can do in music that doesn't involve having musical ability, I did. And I just sort of hit a point where I was kind of done with it. I love music, but it's a very brutal business. And I had one of those like staying up all night trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life moments. And I realized that the only other thing I loved as much as music was comics. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to write comics, but I had no idea how to do it. So it was sort of a long, slow learning process because to me, comics is very solitary in a lot of ways. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends who I read comics with. I didn't go to a comic shop with other people. So, like, I didn't have a lot of friends who read comics, let alone, like, wanted to make them or were making them. And so figuring out how to do it was sort of a long, slow process. But eventually I did. And here I am.
Well, there were probably some steps in between there. And At least I first became aware of your work when you were doing some stuff with Black Mask. You had We Can Never Go Home, which came out in 2015, I think.
Yeah,
Ballpark.
2015. Yeah, that sounds right.
Four Kids Walk Into a Bank in 2017. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So were those two kind of your first
No,
pieces that hit a wider audience?
actually, well, I did. I had a web comic, and I self-published a bunch of stuff that was kind of maybe not great. And my first actual comic was a book at Black Mask. Before those, I did a book called 12 Reasons to Die that I did with members of the Wu-Tang Clan. Basically, someone from RZA's record label knew that I used to be in music and was doing comic stuff, and so he wanted to come do comic stuff, and so they put me in touch with him, and they just basically handed me a book and were like, "Do you want to do this comic?" And I knew the Black Mask guys, like I was a big fan of Steve Niles, and Brett Gurwitz, like who plays guitar in Bad Religion and runs Epitaph Records. Like he was a huge inspiration to me when I was putting out records, and Bad Religion is a very formative band for me. And then Matt Pizzolo, who runs the day-to-day of Black Mask, grew up kind of around me in the same music scene, so we had a lot of friends in common. And so I just kind of brought them this book, 12 Reasons to Die, and I was like, it's a Wu-Tang Clan comic, we're going to have awesome artists in it. And they were like, yeah, sure. So that was my first book. And then after that, because I had a good relationship with them, I brought them We Can Never Go Home. So there's a couple weird, every once in a while I'll do a convention or a store signing and someone will bring me one of my weird self-published comics. But 12 Reasons to Die at Black Mask was my first thing. And then from there, I went sort of straight into We Can Never Go Home.
Excellent. Well, I want to be aware of your time here. I know since we're starting late too, and I know a lot of people are probably tuning in to hear about Hawkeye Freefall. So
Sure.
why don't we jump ahead a little bit, and then if there's still time, we'll backtrack and hit some of your earlier Marvel stuff, which having heard tonight that you kind of learned to read and grew up with the Dark Phoenix saga makes perfect sense. That you were the X-Men guy for a while over at Marvel. But let's come back to that in a minute. Let's just get right to the meat of this, and that's Hawkeye Freefall, which we'll use some inside comics terminology here. So this is on Final Order Cutoff, or FOC, which is the last chance for retailers to increase or decrease our orders for comics. It's on FOC tomorrow. So we want to hear all about it, and we want all of you to add it to your pull lists as soon as possible so that your retailer knows to order a copy for you.
Yeah. Very well said. Like a retailer. I appreciate that. So Hawkeye Freefall starts January 1st, which is a exciting and awkward day to launch a comic, but here we are. And yeah, it's. I did a book at Marvel 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, called Tales of Suspense, which was a Winter Soldier and Hawkeye book with Black Widow, and it was sort of my phone's ringing. It was sort of a cult hit. People are pretty passionate about the book. It wasn't, the biggest best-selling book anyone put out, but it had a really rabid fan base, which is, Marvel tends to notice. And as we were wrapping up, they said, would you be interested in doing Hawkeye? And for me, that's it's a real dream book. He's one of my favorite characters. And so, I put together a pitch right away for a Hawkeye story I wanted to do back then, but then I got sort of caught up in Punisher and X-Men for a while, and we didn't really have time to do it. So I'm really excited for it to come out. It comes out January 1st. It's me and Otto Schmidt, who, if you aren't familiar with him, you're in for a treat. He did a run on Green Arrow at DC. He's done a bunch of stuff, and he's just one of the coolest artists in comics. And I think everyone who sees the art is just blown away. He's really he does action well. His characters are cool and stylish and sexy. But the thing I love about working with him is that his characters are really expressive. So in a Hawkeye book where It's a lot of kind of jokey stuff and kind of goofy. Like you get like Clint's sort of reaction and people's frustrations with him really well. But yeah, so the book is about Hawkeye doing up to his usual stuff. He gets in over his head, and he has a tussle with the Hood, who's one of my favorite villains in the Marvel Universe. And basically, it goes badly, and Hawkeye sort of fixates on the Hood in an unhealthy way. And this is the story of that fixation, of him like really becoming obsessed with taking the Hood down. Meanwhile, there's a sort of second story because there's a new Ronin. Back in the early 2000s, Hawkeye died. He came back as Ronin. Um, it was a secret mystery who he was, and then he was revealed, and other people have been Ronin since. But now there's a new one, and the new one is kind of terrifying and brutal, and everybody assumes it's Hawkeye, but it's not. So we're gonna see. We're gonna find out who the mystery of who Ronin is. It's sort of a mystery that plays out through the book.
Sounds good. Sounds excellent. Anything with Hawkeye these days, it is. I think he's. A lot of people have kind of glommed on to Hawkeye since Matt Fraction's run,
Sure.
specifically in the comics, but I think also Hawkeye in the movies. People are coming in looking for Hawkeye material, and right now, really, the only place people are going to find Hawkeye is in Freefall, right?
Yeah, he's on the bench of the Avengers, so he's not appearing in an Avengers book. He was in West Coast Avengers by Kelly Thompson, which is great, but came to an end. So yeah, this is Hawkeye's show, and yeah, I mean, I think Hawkeye has a very rabid fan base, especially since Matt and David Aja's run, which is a flawlessly good run. If you haven't read it, please pick it up. It's great. But even since then, Jeff Lemire and Ramon Perez did a great Hawkeye book, and Kelly Thompson did a great Hawkeye book. And they're always sort of it's everyone kind of trying to reinvent it every time, which is fun. It's sort of the fun challenge of doing the book is that like it has to stand out from other Marvel books. Like Hawkeye is the book that has to feel really different. And we sort of embrace that. So this feels pretty different. This isn't. You'll see when you read it that it's tonally has a little more. I don't even know how to describe it, but we're going for something that will really stand out against the other books, and Hawkeye is sort of the perfect vehicle for that. So I'm hoping people embrace it.
Well, that's awesome. I know that you're definitely trying to get the word out to your fans, and you're offering to work with retailers like me. So thank you for that, for taking time out of your Sunday to help talk about a book that you're excited about, that we're excited about as retailers. But let's change gears for a minute. Before I do want to put another shout out. If you do have any questions for Matt, go ahead and put those in the comments, and we will get to those as we go along here. I want to thank Brian and Jermaine and Jess and the rest of you who I can't see. Josh, you're on there. But give us a shout out if you're tuning in, and make sure to give us thumbs up and hearts so that more people can see the video and find out what Matt's doing at Marvel with Hawkeye and with Annihilation Scourge, which started last week and is in an event mini series of one shots, right?
Yeah, it's sort of, there's not a great way to describe it because you say it's an event and people assume that they have to read 600 books and it's all encompassing. And then we're like, no, it's just 6 issues, like oversized issues. And then they're like, oh, so it's a mini series. And it's like, well, it's bigger than that. But, it's 6. I mean, there's an Alpha and Omega. The Alpha came out Wednesday, and the Omega is obviously the final issue. And then there's 4 one-shots about the main characters, who are Silver Surfer, the Fantastic Four, Beta Ray Bill, and Nova. And each of the stories is meant that if you're just a Beta Ray Bill fan or a Nova fan or whoever, and you want to just read their comic, you can. But they all have ties to the bigger story and the bigger mystery and puzzles and war that's going on. So it was a fun way to build a kind of book, because we wanted to make sure that every piece of the puzzle is a satisfying read, but it's still a big story. And I think it came together really well. The other writers have all been awesome. It's Dan Abnett and Christos Gage and Mike Morisi doing his first Marvel work. So It's a lot of fun, and I think people next week, when I think it's Nova and Silver Surfer next week, but it might be Fantastic Four. I'm a little sleep deprived, but I think people will see the way it unfolds is very interesting, because every book sort of points to another, and there isn't, for the next 4 issues, there isn't a definite reading chronology, which I think is going to throw people off, but like you can read them in any order, which is really fun. You just have to start with the Alpha and end with the Omega, and you get the whole story.
So are we allowed to talk about who the Scourge of the Negative Zone is at this point?
Um, we can. If you haven't read it, there's a big reveal on the last page of the first issue. There's a big bad guy. If you don't want to know who it is, I guess step away from your computer for a minute. But I'll give you 3 seconds. Yeah, the big bad of the book is the Sentry. He's a little different than people are expecting, and people are a little confused why. I've had a bunch of people say like, "Well, you didn't know that the Sentry did this and did this," and I have to just assure them that I very much know where the Sentry is and what he's doing, and we have a story to tell. But yes, it's the original Annihilation was Annihilus leading the forces of the Negative Zone into our dimension. And this is the opposite. This is heroes having to come help the Negative Zone because it's going to be destroyed. It's going to be overrun, and when it's overrun, nothing stops what's overrunning it from getting to our dimension. And the leader of the force that's overrunning it is the Sentry, who's a terrifying force. And so you're going to see the Sentry in some way or another meet up with the Silver Surfer, Nova, Beta Ray Bill, Fantastic Four, and maybe some surprises coming up. So it's pretty exciting. I'm a big Sentry fan, and getting to play with him is always fun. So,
and yeah, I've kind of lost track of the Sentry. I will freely admit the Sentry is not one of my favorite characters. I did enjoy Bendis's take on him with the New Avengers. You know, I was a huge fan of his original New Avengers run, and that was my first experience with the Sentry. I did read the Paul Jenkins series as well.
I love it.
And I wasn't really clued in on the fact that Mr. Fantastic had kind of, I don't want to say banished, but stuck the Sentry in the Negative Zone to keep, the Void and the Sentry in check. Because if the Sentry was still left in our world, things would have been messed up.
Yeah, so there's been a bunch of developments in the Sentry and other books. He sort of merged with the Void. There used to be like warring personalities, and they became one. And he's sort of not quite a good guy, not quite a bad guy. And he's just been recently appearing in the excellent Agents of Wakanda book. And now he is in the Negative Zone, and we're sort of going to explain more of that and explore more of why he's there and why he looks a little different than the last time we saw him, and what it all means. But yeah, Sentry's a funny character because I really love him, and he seems to be very polarizing for people. Like, there are a lot of people who love him, and there are a lot of people who hate him, and it's always fun to sort of figure out those characters and try and make people excited about them is a fun challenge. Like, it's easy to do a Captain America book and be like, everybody loves Captain America, and like, I'm just going to make them keep loving him. It's more of a challenge to be like, here's a character you hate, and I really want to make you like him. That to me is very fun. And I'm doing the upcoming Force Works book, and I was like, I want US Agent on it really bad because I know a lot of people really don't like US Agent, and I love him as a character. And I just told Marvel I really love the chance to like get people excited about the things I'm excited about. So that to me was a big one. So yeah, I'm hoping people are excited to see Sentry. You only see him for a page in the first issue, but you'll see more of him.
And I think he's on the cover of the Omega. I think that was the giveaway. But
yeah, that was a classified cover that I actually hadn't seen until I was like, why can't I? I was like, well, I don't understand. What's on the last cover? Like, I haven't seen it. And they were like, we didn't want you to tweet it out. It's the Sentry. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah.
Well, we've got some questions from our viewers, if you're up for it.
I'm always up for that. Yeah. Not always.
All right. Well, and I will read them to you since you may not be able to see the type. But the first one is from Jermaine, and I should give a shout out to Jermaine. He is a fantastic retailer. He goes by the handle Lord Retail on Twitter. Runs a comic shop called Acme Comics in Greensboro, North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. And just a heck of a great guy, great retailer, great lover of comics, and friend to all. Jermaine wants to know what you're reading these days that you think is pretty good, either older material or new.
Well, first of all, hey Jermaine, I emailed you this week, but we've been emailing this week, so. But thank you for the question. What have I been reading? I'm kind of crazy and jump around a lot. I have to read a ton of Marvel stuff for work, so I'm always reading more and more Marvel stuff. I just reread all of Force Works for the upcoming Force Works book, and I'm reading all the U.S. agent appearances, a lot of which I've read when I was a kid and when I was younger. And those are all super fun. The Mark Grunwald Captain America stuff that U.S. agent first appeared in are amazing. I'm trying to think, like I could literally go in my bag. I took a break from reading The Walking Dead. I was buying all of it. And then when he finished it, I was like, oh, now I have to go back and read it. So I'm literally on the last trade of The Walking Dead. That's what I was reading last night before I went to bed. I have 3 issues to go. Walking Dead's very good. It's a very good book. Other things I'm really liking. I really liked These Savage Shores from Vault was great. Just creepy, smart, beautiful vampire awesomeness. Friendo from Vault is great. I always love Crowded at Image. Is like one of the most fun books being published. Like that to me is like a real breath of fresh air. Ed Brisson's Ghost Rider has been awesome. I really like that. All the X stuff I've been really excited about, Hickman stuff, but like Marauders is awesome and Excalibur is awesome. Like all those books have been very exciting. Yeah, I mean, I read a lot. I read like basically a trade a night. I was reading some Love and Rockets last night. Yeah, I'm all over the place. What else have I been reading? I'm very excited for James Tynion's Batman, but haven't read it yet. Oh, I read the new issue of Suicide Squad, Tom Taylor's Suicide Squad. That's not out yet, but is also on FOC tomorrow and is great. Everyone who orders Hawkeye should get Suicide Squad and also Thor and Star Wars. I haven't read Star Wars, but I read Donnie's Thor and it's amazing. So yeah, so a lot of stuff. I'm reading a lot of stuff.
Thanks for that question, Jermaine. We now have like
Yes.
3,000 books to read.
Well, sorry.
But no, that's perfectly fine. And I love it when you said you've been reading a lot of Marvel for work, because as a retailer, Tuesday nights it's homework for all of us. You know, we're reading all the new releases so that we can talk to customers the next day and make recommendations and answer questions. So yeah, it is work to work in the comic book business, whether you're a retailer or a writer or an artist or an editor or all that jazz.
Yeah, I worked in retail for just under 3 years, and I was in charge of Tuesday night putting the new books up, and had to be in Wednesday afternoon and sell them. And I loved going home with my stack of books and just being like, I have to get through these. And when I stopped working in the store, I was like, I don't ever want to lose that. I want to like keep the pressure for me to like know everything that's going on. Marvel has made that difficult because I have to read so much stuff, but I still do try and, I'm in the comic shop every week and I buy a ton of stuff and try and consume it as quick as possible. So, but now I get it.
Well, that was a great question. Great question, Jermaine. And I would definitely recommend following Jermaine on Twitter. It's at Lord Retail. At least I think that's his handle. Jermaine does a great job of tweeting out his thoughts on new releases on Tuesday nights. So if you're looking for great stuff to read or pick up at the comic shop on Wednesday, follow at Lord Retail on Twitter. Now, let's see. We've several other questions here, so let's dive right in.
I'll try and...
Okay, the next one is from Josh, and he asked, do you think Hawkeye works better as a quote-unquote street-level hero like Daredevil or Luke Cage, or as a quote-unquote Avengers-level hero like Captain America or Iron Man?
That's a tough question. I think Hawkeye is kind of amazing because I think he is, he's the best. He's my favorite sort of entry point into the Avengers in terms of like the ground eye view. I always talk about, I'm a big fan of Marvels by Alex Ross and Kurt Busiek, as like reminding us all of how amazing and inspiring the Marvel Universe is, and sort of getting the street level view up at these sort of titanic heroes. And Hawkeye, if done well in the Avengers, is that character. He's the character who he's not immortal, and he's not unkillable, and he's not in a suit of armor, and he's just a guy. And so for him to rush into these battles against these world-ending things, the stakes are higher. And so I love him as the sort of like the entry point to that stuff, to sort of see him stand next to Thor and Iron Man and Hulk. Like, he's the bravest guy on the field in a lot of ways. And I always love that. But he to me works at his best as sort of a street level guy. Obviously I love like I said, the Fraction Aja stuff, but the old solo Avenger stuff, and Avenger Spotlight, when it was Avenger Spotlight, those Hawkeye stories are so fun. And like, he's great at getting into trouble and sort of rushing in and getting it over his head, which is harder for him to do when Captain America and Iron Man are there to keep him in check. But like, he's really fun to sort of watch him fly off the handle and have a poorly thought out plan. So I'm going to go with street level, but I do love both a lot.
Excellent. Well, this will be another reminder to add Hawkeye Freefall to your pull list at your local comic shop. Tomorrow is FOC, or Final Order Cutoff. That's our last chance as retailers.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm back.
You're back.
I'm back. Okay. New Star Wars #1 and new Thor #1 by Donny Cates and Nick Klein that is supposedly going to be phenomenal. And if you're a fan of Cates' Absolute Carnage, or what he's done with Guardians or Cosmic Ghost Rider or anything like that, I'm sure that Thor will be right up your alley too. But let's talk about another book that you're writing, and that is Jedi Fallen Order in the Star Wars universe. So you've gotten to play in the Star Wars universe as well. And Jess has a question. She says she's been out of the loop for a while, but she's excited for Jedi Fallen Order. Let's see. We are on issue 4 of that. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And is that a 5-issue miniseries, or is that going to be more?
No, it's 5-issue miniseries. The goal was to get us up to the game, and then there was parts of the story we couldn't tell because we didn't want to spoil the game. So we had to put it out where the first 4 issues came out right before the game, and the last issue's out after the game, because it would explain some things in the game. But yeah, it's a fun Star Wars thing, because it's not focusing on the big guys. It's not Luke, and it's not Kylo, and it's not any of those. There are some fun guest appearances. You got some Mace Windu and some Yoda, but it's a weird in between period. It's before the Clone Wars, so it's in sort of the Phantom Menace era, and it's just about Jedis who are kind of like it's kind of like an Indiana Jones meets Star Wars thing. It's very fun, and the characters appear in the game, and it gives you a good backstory on the game. So it was very fun. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so like pretty much whenever they ask me if I want to do Star Wars stuff, I say yes. But people have been really excited, and I think now that people are playing the game and seeing how it all connects, it's been really fun to watch, because I've never done something like that where it's across multiple medium. But yeah, it's issue 4 is out now. Issue 5 will be out in a few weeks. So, and that's it. That's the whole story.
Awesome. Yeah, and I've always been of the opinion that video game players, it will take just a nudge to get them into comics. It seems like a lot of comic readers play video games, but not a lot of video game players read comics. But something like this that is, that leads right into a video game, or what they've been doing with the PlayStation Spider-Man universe, the books that are coming out from that. I think if you're a video game player, you're totally going to get these comics that are out, and that might be your gateway to the world of comics.
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, I worked closely with Lucasfilm and the Respawn who made the game to sort of make the story flow both ways. So we're hoping that, comics readers might want to pick up the game, and we're hoping that a lot of game players will pick up the comic because you do learn more, both sort of complete a picture for you, which is fun.
Absolutely. Well, I want to circle back real quick to the X-Men, and then we will let you go. We talked about how you got into comics really with the Dark Phoenix saga, and when we were in kind of those in-between days of what's going on with the X-Men, when they were still, the property was over at Fox, and Marvel really didn't know what to do with the X-Men, you wrote at least three outstanding stories.
Oh, thank you.
You had four, really. You count Uncanny X-Men in there too, but three books that kind of stand on their own, and I think people should totally check out. Phoenix Resurrection, which brought Jean Grey back into the land of the living for X-Men fans, and it was so good. Which kind of, I can't remember which came first or which came next, whether it was Multiple Man or New Mutants.
New Mutants came next, yeah.
Okay. So New Mutants, Dead Souls, and then Multiple Man, and both New Mutants, all three of those books were miniseries, and they're all available in graphic novel format and can totally be enjoyed on their own, regardless of where the current X-Men are right now, where everyone's been brought back from the dead on Krakoa. But what was it like, I guess, getting to play with these characters that you really grew up reading?
I mean, it's, I've struggled for a long time to figure out how to answer that question and not have it be cliche, to just be like, well, it was a dream come true. But it literally, when I started making comics, like 2 months in, someone was like, well, what is your dream? And I was like, well, it's to write the X-Men. And then, 6 years later, I'm writing the X-Men, and I was like, oh, I don't really know what to do now. Like, now I'm where I want to be. And it was just awesome. The X-Men is a lot of different things. Like, it works in a lot of different ways. And I sort of had this plan when I started. The era of Chris Claremont and the 17-year run on a book is long past, or is gone for now, hopefully. But I wanted to kind of do these connecting stories that the way he did, where he would weave threads and you wouldn't find out what they were for a bunch of years, and that was always so important to me and so crucial to the X-Men and the whole soap opera-ness of it. That early on I was like starting to pitch miniseries, and I just was like, well, I just want the slightest connective tissue. So like we did Phoenix Resurrection, and then we did New Mutants, and the New Mutants appear in Multiple Man, and they're sort of like, you can read them alone, but if you read them together, there's a connection, and it's the return of Multiple Man, and the New Mutants sort of get in trouble, and then where the New Mutants are, you find out in my Astonishing X-Men miniseries, which is 6 issues, and then all of that spins into Uncanny, and it's a whole big thing, and I was like, well, that's the way I'm going to do the Chris Claremont thing, is to patch together 4 miniseries and an ongoing, and do a 3-year X-Men story that like no one realizes they're getting that at the time. But I'm always happy because people sort of grab pieces of it and connect to it. Like I get a lot of people who love Astonishing, or a lot of people who love Phoenix Resurrection or New Mutants or Multiple Man or Uncanny, but like, the other things didn't speak to them as much, or, there's people who like them all. And, but I love the idea that like the X-Men can be so many different things, that even like one writer can try these different stories, do like a real zany comedy and a, kind of heavy soap opera relationship drama, and it's all feels very X-Men still. So that was really kind of amazing to get to play with. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I said, they're all fantastic, and you can probably find them all at your local comic shop. For me, your Astonishing run pulled me back into the X-Men after being gone for a while, and it was because Havoc was the leader. And I saw recently, it may have been in the last 24 or 48 hours, you tweeted out that Havoc is one of your favorite X-Men characters. And likewise, I grew up with the Claremont Silvestri run on X-Men, where Havoc was kind of back into the team after a long absence, and he didn't really know his place in the world. And so I definitely can connect with the character of Havoc, and it was great to see him back in a book.
Yeah. My two favorite X-Men, and maybe, aside from a couple random things, maybe 2 of my favorite characters in all of fiction are Havoc and Magic. And so like I really wanted to, from go my first minutes at Marvel, I was like, how do I get Havoc? How do I get Magic? And I stealth stuck Magic into Secret Warriors when I was writing Secret Warriors. I stealth stuck them all in my first Marvel 10-page short story. I just couldn't wait to sort of play with them and sort of return them to prominence, because I think they are two of the best X-Men and two of the best characters in comics, bar none, if not the best characters in comics. So yeah, I'm glad other Havoc fans appreciate it. Every once in a while, someone will come up to me at a con and be like, "I'm a Havoc fan," and I'll be like, "Oh, cool." And you never know if someone's going to be like, "You screwed up," and they're always just like, "Can I get a hug?" or whatever. And it's always nice. It's usually nice. Hugs aren't always nice, but it's nice. It's a nice sentiment. We'll keep it at that.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that, so I'm going to leave that.
Okay, that's fair.
But just want to remind everyone, Hawkeye Freefall is on FOC tomorrow. It'll be out in about 3 weeks, coming out on January 1st. And some shops are doing midnight releases. We're thinking about doing a New Year's Eve party at Alter Ego. So if you're interested, let me know in the comments. So we've never done a midnight opening before, Matt, in 13, 14 years of doing this. But this might be a great reason to do it. So make sure you let your retailer know that you want Hawkeye Freefall. And then Force Works is out in February.
Yeah.
It's in the December previews catalog, which drops next week. And I thought I saw that it is a 3-issue mini.
Three-issue mini. It ties into the Iron Man 2020 event, which is going to be very cool, and I'm very excited about. And basically, like, Dan Slott's doing that, and he pitched it in the room, and I was just so excited. And then, as a fan, was just into it. And then someone was like, "Yeah, we might do a Force Works book." And I loved Force Works when I was a kid, so I immediately was like, "I want it, and I need U.S. Agent and War Machine." And so here we are doing a Force Works book. It's kind of weird. But
and we've got Mockingbird and Quake in there as well.
Mockingbird and Quake, and some surprise guests will be appearing, which I think people will enjoy. But yeah, that's the team. U.S. Agent, War Machine, Mockingbird, and Quake. Sort of a war espionage robot thing. Should be cool. I'm excited.
All right. Well, is there anything else coming down the road that you want to plug here?
There's a couple Marvel things I can't talk about, which is always exciting. And I have a book coming out from Image in the spring of next year, hopefully, called What's the Furthest Place from Here? It's me and Tyler Boss, who I did Four Kids Walking to a Bank with. It's a post-apocalyptic coming-of-age story about a bunch of punk rock kids who live in a record store after the end of the world. And we're really excited about it. We announced it a while ago, and I had to step away from the book for a little bit for personal reasons, but we're getting back into it now, and it's so fun, and I can't wait for people to see it. So
that sounds awesome. Looking forward to it, and I'm sure you'll be tweeting about it and sharing that on social media. If people want to follow you on social, where can they find you?
Yeah, Ashcan Press at ASHCANPRESS is my Twitter, and I have their Facebook, although I don't use the Facebook very much, and I have it on Instagram, but I never use Instagram, so basically just Twitter.
Okay. I discovered that you don't use Instagram when I tried to tag you in a post promoting this, and I'm like, man, he hasn't posted in like a very long time.
No, it gets overwhelming. There's a lot of ways to talk to people, and people will message you on all of them, and I'm kind of like, oh, I can't keep track of all that. So I figured, like, focus on Twitter. It's just words. I'm a writer. It's easier for me.
Hey, makes sense. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for taking the time on this Sunday evening to talk about some of your upcoming works, to answer questions from our viewers. And I wish you nothing but the best, and hopefully we'll get to talk again when you have some more books coming down the road.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, thanks for tuning in. This was fun.
Cool. Well, that's it, everybody. We're going to sign off. I'll add Matt's social stuff in the comments. And if you're a local Alter Ego customer, make sure you get to me to reserve Hawkeye Freefall, and be happy to point you towards the rest of Matt's books next time you're in the shop. So thanks for watching, and we'll see all of you real soon.
Awesome.